When you really get down to it, what is the line between a simple act and a serious crime? It's fascinating, right? Especially under India's new criminal code, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Because in the eyes of the law, definitions are everything. I mean, a single word can literally be the difference between years in prison and walking free.
I mean, really think about it. When does killing someone become murder? Or when does just moving a person from one spot to another turn into the crime of kidnapping? And look, these aren't just questions for a late-night debate. No way. This is the absolute bedrock of our entire justice system.
All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to start with homicide versus murder, and we'll get into this super important idea of a causal connection. After that, we'll switch gears to kidnapping and abduction. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll see why all these little details matter a lot.
Okay, let's tackle the big one first. Homicide versus murder. Now, the key here is to stop thinking of them as two totally separate things. Instead, picture a spectrum of unlawful killing. And where an act falls on that spectrum, well, that almost always comes down to two little things: intent and circumstance.
So at the very top, the broadest category, you've got homicide. All it means is one human causing the death of another. Simple, right? But it can be lawful, think of a state execution, for example, or it can be unlawful. And that unlawful side, well, that's where we're headed. And believe me, it gets complicated fast.
So, for an unlawful killing to actually count as a crime, specifically culpable homicide, the prosecution has a three-part test they have to pass. Step 1, a death occurred. I know, sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised. Step 2, and this one is huge, there has to be a direct causal connection. And finally, step 3, they've got to prove the accused had what's called a guilty mind, or mens rea.
Okay, let's zero in on that second step, that causal connection. This thing is absolutely critical. It's the link, the direct line between what the accused did and the victim's death. For both sides, the prosecution and the defense, this connection is the linchpin. The whole case hangs on it.
And I really want you to focus on that word must. The act must be the direct reason for the death. If there's any break in that chain, the whole case can just fall apart. This is the weak point every defense lawyer looks for. It's why criminals are so desperate to get rid of evidence, like the weapon. You break that link, and the prosecution's case crumbles.
All right, here's a classic law school example to show you exactly how this works. Picture this. An attacker injures someone. The wound is bad, but it's not fatal. So an ambulance comes to take them to the hospital. But the ambulance driver, he's driving like a maniac, totally reckless, and he crashes. The victim dies in that crash. You see what just happened? Legally, that chain of causation we talked about, it's been broken. A brand new event just took over.
So that leaves us with a huge question, right? Who is legally responsible for the death? Is it the original attacker, or is it the ambulance driver? Now, don't get me wrong, the attacker is absolutely on the hook for the injury, but for the death, legally, all eyes turn to the ambulance driver. His reckless driving became the new, direct cause, completely snapping that link back to the first attack.
Okay, so let's keep building on this, because here's where it gets even more interesting. Even when a case looks like a slam dunk, open and shut murder, the law has these special exceptions, little escape hatches that can actually reduce the charge. This is really where we get into the nitty-gritty between a cold, calculated act and a sudden crime of passion.
Now get ready for this, because it's going to sound a little weird. You'd think that for something to be called murder, the level of intent has to be way higher than for just culpable homicide, right? Makes sense. But it's not. The law, as it's written, says the highest level of intent for both is exactly the same, with the intention of causing death. Identical. So, if the intent is the same, what on earth is the difference?
Well, the answer is in these special exceptions. The way the system works is fascinating. The prosecution aims for the most serious charge, murder. They prove that first. Then the defense gets a chance to argue for a downgrade. They can say yes, but there was grave and sudden provocation, or it was a sudden fight in the heat of passion. If they can prove one of these, bam, the charge gets knocked down. It's the law's way of saying, hey, we get it. Sometimes things aren't so black and white.
All right, let's switch gears completely. We've talked about crimes of killing, now let's talk about crimes of taking. We're going to unpack the offense of kidnapping. And on this one, you'll see the law takes a really hard, absolute stance. And for a very good reason.
So, the legal definition here is super specific. For it to be kidnapping from lawful guardianship, two things have to be true.
First, the victim's status. They have to be a minor, that's under 16 for boys, 18 for girls, or a person of unsound mind. Second, they have to be taken from their guardian's care without the guardian's permission. And notice that last part. The victim's own consent doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant.
And this is where kidnapping becomes a whole different beast. It's what lawyers call a crime of strict liability. And what that means is the court doesn't care what you were thinking, your intention, your motive, totally irrelevant. They don't even care if you honestly, truly believed the victim was an adult. The simple act of taking the minor is the crime. End of story.
There's a famous case that just sums it all up perfectly. The defense of, "I thought she was an adult." It's not a defense at all. It just doesn't work. The law's purpose here is crystal clear and absolute. Protect minors and protect the rights of their guardians. Period.
Okay, so if that's kidnapping, then what in the world is abduction? They sound so similar, you hear them used interchangeably all the time. But legally, oh, they are worlds apart. Abduction is all about how it's done, and more importantly, why it's done.
So right off the bat, a huge difference. Abduction can happen to anyone at any age. And the key ingredients here are the methods. You're either talking about force, physically compelling someone, or you're talking about deceit, tricking them into going somewhere. And this is where it all comes together. Let's just run through the big differences. Victim's age? Kidnapping is only for minors. Abduction can be anyone. The method? Kidnapping is about taking, while abduction uses force or deceit. But here it is, the single most critical difference, the nature of the crime itself. Kidnapping is what's called a standalone crime. Just doing it is illegal. Abduction, on the other hand, is not. It only becomes a crime when it's part of a bigger plan, when it's a stepping stone to something else, like murder or demanding a ransom. See the difference? Tricking someone into getting in your car by itself isn't abduction in a criminal sense, but tricking them in order to harm them, now you've crossed the line.
So we've been deep in the weeds here, looking at all these fine lines and technicalities. So what's the big picture? What's the takeaway? Why does the law get so nitpicky about all these definitions?
It's because those details, they are justice. That's the foundation of the whole system. These details are the line that separates a tragic accident from a cold-blooded murder. They're what distinguishes a dumb mistake from a predatory crime. All these little nuances, intent, age, method, purpose, they are the tools the system uses to measure just how responsible someone is, and to make sure the punishment truly fits the crime.
And that really leaves us with one final big question to chew on. Our entire system of justice is built on this incredibly difficult task, finding the truth that's hidden behind all these fine lines. Proving what someone was thinking, proving that direct causal link, proving their ultimate purpose. I mean, in a world full of conflicting stories, foggy memories, and missing evidence, how do we ever ensure we get it right?